Hey everybody, today we're going to draw this black-tailed deer. Now, if you want to follow along, the reference image is linked down in the description. Let's draw. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do here is scale out our deer. So I like to start out with the deer's head and then I'll work my way around the body. I often start out with the ears because the ears have a pretty unique shape. Then I use those to compare other features on the animal's face and line them up accordingly. So, for example, here on the ears, I notice this left ear is far above where this right ear starts. Again, comparing, the nose is about in line with the top of this ear. So I'm going to make a little adjustment here. So little things like that, I'm just always comparing to make sure I get my scale down. So continue on using this comparing technique as you finish outlining the deer's body. Getting things scaled and proportioned correctly, I feel, is probably the most critical step in drawing wildlife, because if your scale is not accurate and then you start adding all those details in, it's going to be pretty easily noticed. But one thing to remember, we can still adjust all of this as we move on our next steps. I like to focus on these main features first, because since we're happy with the scale and proportion of the deer's head, once we have the eyes and nose drawn in, the fur kind of falls into place, and additionally it's easier to add more fur or less fur as opposed to moving the eyes or nose. So let's start with the easiest eye first, this left one over here. I'm just going to lightly mark in the highlighted fur here, and it's hard to see, but it does round out a little bit. Now let's move over to this larger right eye. So comparing the left eye to the right eye, the bottom of the left eye is above the right eye, and the back side of the right eye is kind of in the middle of this hump. So if we just sort of sketch those lines in, now just slightly down from that, let's put the corner of the right eye in, just lightly sketching it in. Let's erase those guidelines we made. Hone in that shape a little bit with my eraser. Now with my 2B pencil, I'm going to go back in. There's a little white reflection spot up at the top. At this small of a scale, it's hard to get a lot of detail in, so I want to make sure I work in what I can. So right in the corner of the eye here, you have a slightly lighter part of the eye that circles it. And the last thing I'm going to do is just rough in this shape of the deer's eyebrow up here, just to sort of prepare us for our next steps once we start adding the fur. The lower part of the deer's eye also comes down and around like this, and then circles back and up. So I'm happy with that. Now let's go down and focus on the nose. The deer's mouth and nose here is just slightly behind this rock, but we're just going to draw it as if it's showing. Now what I always work towards when drawing nose is making sure it shows the dimensionality of the face. So I'm just starting and outlining the top of the deer's nose here. And here's where it kind of comes down the side, and this light reflection shows where it's actually going down the front of the deer's face. Right here is where the nostril appears on this side. I'm just lightly shading in the deer's nose here with the HB pencil, and then I'm going to go back and fill things in with my 2B pencil. And I'm being really careful so I can leave this reflective line here. The under part of the deer's mouth is just barely showing here, but then you see some of these black spots here trailing over. So I'm just going to do little light taps of that to mimic that darker fur texture, and then we'll see how we're looking. On this side, you can just slightly see the nostril coming in. So I'm adding a little bit of a hard line over here. Okay, so noses are really hard to draw, so I wanted to get a better lens on here, which will hopefully give you a better view of what I'm doing. So the main thing I'm working on here is just showing the different dimensions of the deer's face. So you have this front portion that comes right down the front of the nose here. Then this little reflective line shows where it starts to curve up through the flatter part of the deer's face going in between the eyes. And this nostril here signals the side of the nose where it goes up and into the deer's cheek. The other thing I have working here is on this left side, you can just barely see the nostril coming out, and there's a slight rounding here before it flattens up and goes to the eyes. The main thing you should really just work on here is being patient with yourself. Noses are really hard, especially at this small of a scale. But just try your best to finesse, finesse, finesse in these tight little areas. That's really the best advice I can give you. I'm going to finesse this bottom of the deer's mouth just a little bit. Should be a little bit more like that as you begin to see it curve around to the other side. I'm happy with the nose, so now let's add the fur to the deer's head here. So the technique for adding fur to the deer's face is going to be a layering of our different values of pencil, starting with the 4H pencil. Then we're going to go in with our HB pencil, and finally we're going to go over the top of that with our 2B pencil. But the main things being, with each pencil, try to match the length and the direction of hair that you are drawing in. So I'm just going to lightly start penciling in the hair, trying to follow the direction. A lot of the lightest value here in this 4H pencil is going to be covered up when we add our darker values. However, it will help add depth when we blend all of our fur together. So just continue all around the deer's head here, doing your best to match the length and direction. Even make sure to add some 4H pencil in your highlights, because think, even highlights have slight shadows within them. They're just not very dark. Just make sure to be super subtle with it. I'm going to take out this hard line that we have in, because I want to go over that with our hair and give that a more natural look. I'm just going to remove the outline of this right ear as well. There's a lot of highlights shaping that ear rather than darker shades. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing with my HB pencil. The big difference being, I'm mostly going to stay away from the highlight areas and focus more on those mid-tone areas. Also, working with a mechanical pencil, I'm going to try to make even smaller marks. I'm also going to vary up my pressure a little bit more since I'm a little darker, just to give more variety in my values. When you're working with your mechanical pencils like this, don't be concerned if you're working with the flatter, dull part of your lead. That slight blurriness is actually going to help us create the fur-like texture here. Now we do the same thing with the 2B pencil. Really hone in on where your darkest fur is and stay away from those lighter areas. Make sure to lift up your pencil often. We've been putting all this work into creating these different valued layers. We want to make sure those different pencils show through. Okay, so the next step is take a blending tool and very slowly and gently give everything a little blend. Don't do really big marks. You just want to give everything a little smudge so those different values blend together a little bit to create a more uniform fur texture. Of course, stay away from your eyes and your nose. If your blending tool gets too full of graphite, clean it off on a piece of sandpaper and then just go back at it. I'm still using the blending tool in the same direction as the hair, and also, as best as I can, trying to match the length of the hair. Just work really small. So we'll say that's good. I'm just going to clean up this little line right here. Okay, so now the next step is take your eraser, sharpen the tip to a really good point. Now we're going to do the same thing as we just did with the blending tool. Again, still going in the direction and trying to match the length of the fur. I'm mostly just focusing on those highlight areas, but really any spot that you need to lighten up and remove some of the graphite with, I'm just doing little tap marks going in the shape of the face here. Of course, if you need a more intense spot erased, use an electric eraser. But for the most part, I try to do it with this manual eraser because it's a lot less aggressive. You just want to be super subtle as you work your way around. Around the edges of the deer's head, there are some highlighted hairs. I'm just going to rough in an outline here, just so if we were to draw in a background, we know that's where it should start. So you can see our layering technique of our different value pencils and then blending and smudging them does a really good job of getting a hair-like texture, despite the fact that we're working in an area that's basically about the size of a penny. I'm just going to finesse the highlights and shadows a bit more. The head is by far the most important part of the deer drawing, so it's worth spending the extra time to get all the details as good as you can get them. Okay, so I'm happy with the deer's head now. Let's get to the body. With the deer's head complete, the hard part is over. So now we're just on repeat here with our fur layering technique and our different value pencils and blending as we finish off the rest of the deer. The hair is longer on the body, so take that into account as you continue to make your pencil marks in the according direction and length. I like to use drawing techniques like this with these small incremental steps because it allows you to see how everything's developing and make adjustments as you go, rather than a mistake revealing itself and just having to start over completely. Now once you make it down to the deer's legs, there are a lot more highlights, so you can abbreviate the technique as you need to. And the same goes for the deer's black tail, where you draw in the darkest patch of fur. Now let's back out and take a look at the full deer here and see if there's anything we want to tidy up a little. I'm just going to do some slight finessing of our hair throughout, nothing too major. Lastly, I'm just going to roughen some grass in the foreground here to finish off our drawing. Please subscribe and like to support my work, and let me know down in the comments how your deer drawing turned out. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.